Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we distill complex market signals into the clear insights you need. For any American investor trying to navigate the fast-paced world of biotech, it can feel like trying to read a foreign language, especially when huge news hits, like a billion-dollar acquisition. It shakes everything up, all the jargon, the speed of change. It's easy to feel, well, completely lost.
Exactly, and that's really why we're here today. Our mission is to cut through all that noise. We're taking a deep dive into Verve Therapeutics. Now, this is a company that was once a classic high-risk, high-reward independent play, but it just went through a massive transformation. We'll show you what Verve was, what it is now, and critically, what that huge shift means for your investment thinking.
Okay, let's really unpack this. We want to look at it like a professional stock analyst would. Our sources for this deep dive cover Verve from two really crucial angles. First, as that standalone publicly traded company, and then the big change, as a newly acquired asset within a major pharma powerhouse, Eli Lilly. And the shift in status, well, it changes absolutely everything for an investor. It demands a whole new way of looking at it.
Indeed, it does. So today we're going to break down Verve's pretty groundbreaking gene editing technology. We'll look back at the investment thesis that used to surround it. And then we pivot to what this acquisition by Eli Lilly really signals for the broader biotech sector, for healthcare, even for key macroeconomic trends. Think of this as your shortcut, really, to getting fully up to speed on a critical biotech development, all from an investor's viewpoint.
Right. To really get the scale of this change, we need to first understand the sort of tightrope act Verve was walking before Lilly came in. Picture a small, nimble, cutting-edge startup. Groundbreaking tech, yes, but sailing solo in the, let's face it, treacherous waters of early drug development. That was Verve Therapeutics, a biotech focused specifically on using gene editing for cardiovascular diseases. What was so special about their tech?
What was really fascinating here is Verve wasn't just using standard gene editing. They're using something called base editing. It's a more, let's say, refined technique that comes from the CRISPR technology everyone's heard about. So traditional CRISPR-Cas9 often cuts both strands of the DNA. Think of it like using scissors. Base editing, though, aims to precisely change just a single letter, a single base sequence in the DNA. It's more like fixing a single typo in a huge book without cutting the page. Potentially more precise, maybe fewer side effects.
Okay, more like a pencil and eraser than scissors. And their business focus matched that precision, developing therapies for things like high LDL cholesterol, the bad kind, and preventing or treating cardiovascular disease, ASCVD, basically hardened arteries. Their pipeline had candidates like VRV-101, that one targeted HEF, which is a serious inherited high cholesterol condition, and VRV-102 was another. But crucially, these were still in early-stage clinical trials. So for investors, that meant actually selling a product. Commercialization was, well, a long time away.
Yeah, a very distant prospect. Pre-acquisition, Verve definitely had an edge in its niche. They were seen as a leader in gene editing for heart disease. But, and this is a big but, they faced some serious competition. Other big gene editing names like Intellia, CRISPR Therapeutics, Editas Medicine, all of them were racing for breakthroughs for patents. It was a crowded field.
Now let's talk financials. Because early-stage biotech financials are a whole different ballgame compared to, say, analyzing Apple or Ford. For Verve, revenue was tiny, practically non-existent, maybe some cash from collaboration deals, but nothing from selling their own drugs yet. As you said, that was years away. So how did investors even try to value a company like this?
That's the million-dollar question, or in this case, maybe the billion-dollar question. Because your standard metrics, PE ratio, price to sales, mostly useless here. Companies like Verve, they ran almost entirely on external fuel. Funding came from selling stock, their IPO, follow-on offerings, plus strategic partnerships with bigger companies, sometimes government grants, venture capital early on. And drug development is incredibly expensive. Massive R&D spending meant big operating losses were just expected. It was the norm. So instead of profits, investors had to track different things, these non-traditional metrics.
Exactly. Things like the burn rate, how fast are they spending their cash, and the runway, how much time do they have left before that cash runs out. These were absolutely critical. They told you when the next funding round might be needed, which often meant more share dilution for existing investors. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were survival metrics.
Yeah, and beyond those cash metrics, arguably the most important factors weren't financial at all. It was all about the clinical stage of their drugs and the actual data coming out of those trials. Success in phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. That could move the stock price more than anything else. You'd see these huge jumps or crashes based on results announced at big medical meetings like the AHA or ESC conferences.
And other major price drivers. Regulatory news was huge. Getting an IND, that's the FDA saying okay to start human trials, that's a big step. Or getting fast track or breakthrough therapy status, which could speed things up. And of course, the ultimate goal, final FDA approval. Strategic partnerships with big pharma were also key. They brought in cash and validation, even if it meant giving up some future upside. And naturally, investors watched competitor news, patent filings, any management changes, and all those SEC filings, the 10Ks, 10Qs, 8Ks. Constant vigilance was needed.
So let's sum up that pre-acquisition picture for you, the investor. Verve was basically the textbook definition of high risk, high reward. The opportunity side, you had breakthrough gene editing tech, a massive potential market in heart disease, the chance for truly explosive stock gains if the clinical data hit, plus a solid patent portfolio.
But the risks were just as big, right? A very high chance of clinical failure. Most drugs don't make it. Long development timelines testing everyone's patience. The constant need for more cash, often meaning dilution, intense competition, and just a lot of uncertainty around regulations for these brand new types of therapies. If you invested directly in Verve back then, you had to be watching it constantly. It wasn't optional, it was essential. Basically, a bet where you could hit a home run or, well, strike out completely. Definitely not for the faint of heart. A very high stakes game indeed. But then, for those investors holding on, everything changed almost overnight. Let's get into the game changer, the huge news. Eli Lilly completed its acquisition of Verve Therapeutics, July 25, 2025. For anyone analyzing Verve, this just flips the script entirely.
Absolutely. This is a major move, and it sends ripples through the whole biotech world. The deal was valued around $1.3 billion total. That included $10.50 per share in cash up front, plus up to another $3 per share in these things called CVR's contingent value rights. Think of CVRs as like a bonus payment, but it only pays out if Verve's drugs hit specific future milestones like getting through phase 3 or getting FDA approval. They're non-tradable, so it's a bit of a waiting game. And Lilly's goal here is pretty clear. They want to use Verve's base editing tech to create one-and-done treatments for cardiovascular diseases.
And you can see how it fits perfectly into Lilly's existing strengths, boosting their portfolio immediately. Verve's key programs like VERVE-101 and 102, targeting the PCSK9 gene, VERVE-201 for NGTTL3, VRVE-301 for LPA. These all slot right into Lilly's big focus on cardiovascular and metabolic diseases.
Right. And for those former Verve shareholders, the impact is direct. Verve stock doesn't trade anymore. They got the cash and these CVRs. That's it. So trying to analyze Verve's standalone financials or its specific stock drivers now, it's irrelevant, pointless. All the focus shifts. Now it's about Eli Lilly. Verve is just one part, albeit an important new part, of the much larger Lilly story.
This deal also really shines a light on some bigger trends happening across biotech. What does it tell us? First, it's a huge validation for gene editing. Technologies like CRISPR and Verve's base editing, they're clearly seen as incredibly valuable. The potential to fix the root cause of a disease, not just treat symptoms, that's the holy grail. Lilly buying Verve signals massive confidence in this whole field.
Second, it shows you Big Pharma's strategy playbook. These large companies, they're increasingly buying innovation instead of trying to discover everything in-house from scratch. They acquire promising smaller biotechs like Verve, especially after they have some positive early data. It lowers their own R&D risk and gets them cutting-edge tech quickly. For smaller biotechs, these acquisitions are vital exit opportunities. It gives them a path forward that might be tough on their own. This deal really highlights that M&A trend.
Third, it underscores the massive ongoing need for better treatments for heart disease. I mean, despite all the progress we've made, it's still the #1 killer globally. So the idea of a one-and-done gene editing fix, that's incredibly attractive. It's chasing a cure, not just management.
And lastly, it touches on investment sentiment in the sector. Biotech is famously volatile, right? Highly sensitive to interest rates, regulations, and of course, trial results. Maybe easing interest rates could help the sector broadly, make funding easier. But at the end of the day, for companies like Verve, now inside Lilly, individual clinical success is still what matters most for creating value.
Okay, so Verve is now part of Lilly, but the science is still early stage in many ways. What about those risks? Do they just disappear? Or do they just become Lilly's risks now? Let's start there. Clinical trial failure has to still be top of mind. Verve's main drugs are still early or mid-stage.
Absolutely right. Those risks don't vanish, they transfer. And a failure now in a later stage trial, phase 2 or 3, that would be a significant hit to Lilly's investment case for this deal. If a drug fails due to safety issues, unexpected side effects, or just doesn't work well enough, That's a major setback, and we still need more long-term safety data for all gene editing therapies. These are permanent changes, so understanding the effects years down the road is crucial.
And the technical risks specific to gene editing, things like off-target effects.
Yes, exactly. Even with precise base editing, there's still a small possibility of making unintended edits elsewhere in the genome. That's the off-target risk. Plus, the body's immune system could react. It might react to the delivery vehicle, often a harmless virus shell like an AAV used to get the editor into cells, or it could react to the editing proteins themselves. An immune response could make the therapy less effective or even cause side effects.
Right. And then there's the regulatory hurdle. You mentioned these are revolutionary therapies. That means regulators like the FDA and EMA are going to scrutinize them incredibly carefully. The fact that they make potentially irreversible changes means the bar for safety and efficacy is very, very high. Approval isn't guaranteed, and the pathways can be complex.
And even if a therapy gets approved, making these things is tough. Manufacturing gene therapies at commercial scale is complex, it's expensive, you need specialized facilities, GMP standards, scaling up production to meet demand for a major disease. That could face delays, and the cost of goods could be really high.
Okay, what about intellectual property? The gene editing space is known for patent fights.
Yeah, it's a legal minefield.
Yeah.
Lilly certainly did their homework, their due diligence, before buying Verve. But patent disputes can still pop up. That could lead to costly legal battles or force Lilly into licensing deals, eating into profits. And one last risk, market access. Even if a drug works perfectly and gets approved, these are likely to be very expensive treatments initially. Getting insurance companies to cover them, ensuring patients can actually access them, that's another major hurdle that impacts how profitable they can ultimately be.
So Lilly inherited the promise, but also the challenges. How does Verve, now backed by Lilly, compete in this tough landscape?
Well, they face direct competition from other gene editing players. You've got CRISPR Therapeutics, Intellia, Editis, mostly using the standard CRISPR-Cas9, and perhaps most directly Beam Therapeutics, because they also specialize in base editing. So that's a head-to-head competitor in the same specific technology niche.
And beyond those using similar tech,
Right, they're indirect competitors too. Other types of genetic medicines like older AAV-based gene therapies, think Sarepta or Novartis and other disease areas, or RNAi therapies like those from Alnylam. Some of these also target cardiovascular pathways just using different biological mechanisms.
but now Verve has the Lilly advantage. What does that bring to the fight?
It brings a lot. First, that base editing precision we talked about, potentially fewer off-target edits than traditional CRISPR. That's a scientific edge. Second, their deep focus on cardiovascular disease gives them a chance to really own that space if the drugs work. Third, and this is huge, is Lilly's backing. We're talking massive financial resources, a global R&D machine, deep expertise in running large clinical trials, especially in heart disease, and serious commercial power. Plus, Verve's focus on in vivo editing, treating patients directly rather than taking cells out, editing them, and putting them back, could be more convenient if they can get the delivery right.
Okay, we keep saying base editing. Let's dig into that just a bit more for listeners. Can you contrast it again with standard CRISPR? Why is this nuance so important for investors trying to gauge the innovation here?
Sure, think of it like this. Standard CRISPR-Cas9 is like using molecular scissors to cut both strands of the DNA double helix at a specific spot. The cell then tries to repair that cut, but sometimes the repair process itself introduces small errors, little insertions or deletions called indels. Sometimes that's the goal, to knock out a gene, but it can be unpredictable. Base editing is different. It doesn't make that double-strand cut. Instead, it uses a disabled CRISPR system to guide an enzyme directly to one specific DNA base, one letter. And that enzyme then chemically converts that base into a different one. For example, changing an AT pair to a GC pair. It's a direct chemical modification.
So it's really more like molecular surgery with a tiny pen, not scissors.
That's a good analogy. And the potential advantages come from that non-cutting approach. Better accuracy, much lower risk of those unwanted indels, maybe less toxic to cells. You can be very efficient for making specific, targeted single-letter changes. But it has limitations, too. It can only make certain types of base conversions, not all possible DNA changes. And like all gene editing, success depends heavily on safely and effectively delivering the editing machinery into the right cells inside the body using those AAVs or lipid nanoparticles, LNPs. Research is constantly refining these delivery methods and minimizing any off-target risk.
But the targets they're going after, PCSK9, ANGPTL3, LP, these aren't random genes, right?
Not at all. These are genes that are already known. They're validated targets linked to cardiovascular disease. Other drugs already target the proteins these genes make. The revolutionary idea here is to make a permanent, one-time genetic fix using base editing. The medical value and the potential market value, if that works safely, it's immense.
And this is where the Lilly synergy comes in full force. How does Lilly's internal machinery boost Verve's chances?
Well, first, R&D Lilly is an absolute powerhouse. They have a huge budget, decades of experience in cardiovascular and metabolic diseases, a massive global network for running clinical trials. They know how to navigate the FDA and other regulators. They could accelerate Verve's pipeline development in a way Verve likely couldn't alone. And they have experience integrating complex biotech acquisitions.
And beyond R&D, manufacturing and actually selling the drug.
Huge advantage there, too. Lilly has access to or knows how to manage the sophisticated manufacturing needed. Those GMP facilities are crucial for quality control. They have established global distribution networks, massive marketing teams, experienced regulatory affairs departments. They know how to launch blockbuster drugs. And finally, it's about people. Merging Verve's sharp, innovative scientists with Lilly's deep bench of scientific leaders and business experts. That integration is key to making this acquisition a long-term success.
Okay, let's bring it all together. What's the final takeaway for you, the American investor, watching this unfold? We've gone from Verve, the high-risk, high-reward standalone biotech, to Verve as a key piece inside Eli Lilly. So analyzing Verve on its own, that's history now. Obsolete. Your focus has to shift entirely. It's now about how Verve's gene editing tech fuels Lilly's overall long-term growth. Where does it fit in Lilly's bigger pipeline? How does this acquisition position Lilly in the evolving biotech landscape and against broader health trends? It's a masterclass in how big pharma can acquire innovation to try and secure future growth. Your investment analysis has to evolve right along with it.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering the sheer resources of Eli Lilly now backing Verve's potentially one-and-done gene editing approach, what could this really mean for treating common chronic diseases like heart disease down the road? How might these potentially curative therapies fundamentally reshape not just global healthcare, but maybe even the long-term investment strategies we all rely on?
It's a profound question. If this deep dive was helpful in clarifying the landscape for you, please consider subscribing for more insights.